Okay,
There's two Harringtons.
Yeah, I mean, my world was blown apart this morning, right?
You have two Michael Harrington.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
removed the other Michael Harrington from the meeting.
But he's a doctor, so.
Yeah.
way-
Oh, okay.
Right.
Well, he didn't know about workforce.
This
Yeah.
was a doctor testifying on cancer. Yeah.
9 o'clock, you should be on.
It is.
Oh my gosh.
Off the Hammer, yeah.
Wait,
Oh,
Michael
no.
Hamrock. It was,
Oh.
okay.
But he logged in as Michael Harrington.
Oh, really? No, it's okay, I'll like.
Thank
He
you
was
for
logged
saying
in as
that.
Michael.
So strange.
Yeah.
Okay.
We have
Oh, we
chairs.
kicked him off.
So it's a Friday, April 18th. Yeah, you're welcome to find a chair. We can ask for more chairs. Ooh, I have my
Just not the
baby
fancy
monitor.
ones. So.
Oh, hi, you're.
Oh, look at it. I know. Well, I turned. April.
No, just for your own protection, I'm not.
Yes. It is April 19th, it's on Economic Development, Housing and General Affairs. We are spending the next better part of an hour on H55. It says possible vote. I'd like to try and return to it and get some things worked out today. If we don't take a vote, that's okay. I'm sure this bill probably has to make another stop anyway. I'll look through it with Cameron. What do you think?
I imagine it's gonna have to go fine.
That's what I was thinking. So
Yeah.
we'll move as quickly as we can, but we don't have to take a vote today if we're not ready. Our first witness, our first subject is baby bonds. Because we are putting into the bill a pilot for baby bonds that's privately funded. We just started.
Sorry, I'm gonna start coming directly here. The minute I hit my committee room, I'm in trouble.
Well, listen.
Then I think you should just bypass.
You do it far less to me than I do to you, so never apologize. Justin, it's nice to see you. I don't think I realized you were in the treasurer's office. That could be my delayed understanding, but it's nice to see you. And are we prepared to put the language up? We have the language.
Actually, John Gray has the latest language that I don't have it all in one piece. The last piece was by email, so I was hoping to see it posted. Is it?
I can send it
Oh,
to,
you're on this too. Okay.
I can send it to Magali and we can chat.
Okay. Okay. We're working on getting the language up, but you could go ahead and go through the concept.
Yeah, excellent. Really the only tweak here is that the treasurer's office, understanding that there was concern about a funding source this year, the thought that we had was that if we could secure donations specifically targeted at launching a pilot program so that we could figure out, sort of do a test run on a much smaller size, if we could secure funds from an independent source, which would alleviate your concerns while also allowing us to start figuring out the ins and outs of the program of, how do we work on communications? How do we work on getting the most up-to-date data to identify prospective recipients? Things like that. How do we work on the accounting? All of those pieces. And so working with Ledge Council, we really just added it. It's really in 602. We added slight language tweaks that would allow, that would not create the burden of the program going live without securing that funding. So the reporting piece is still in there, but now we have language for the pilot program that makes it clear it is proposed, it's contingent implementation upon securing funding. And so there's 602 is really where the magic happens in the latest version. It's 602 B3 and 2D is where it happens. And I don't know, do you folks have it up
You
yet?
want to share your screen?
I can share. I just use the caveat that this is not the latest version. So let me share. Oh, participant screen sharing is disabled. I'm getting that note.
So everyone can.
Justin, hold on one sec. We're just explaining where it is.
Don't name like subsections right now, because that
Okay,
just
gotcha.
look at them.
Talk concepts.
Yeah, so that really is the concept, is that we're not changing the rest of baby bonds overall as it's been put into H55, but it really is the idea now that if we can secure independent funding while we have our report piece still in the bill, and that will continue no matter whether we receive funding or not, we now have authority that the treasurer, if we get money, we can put out an official statement, which would make a publication, which would make the pilot program basically kickstarted, would make it live. And then the pieces in the bill that allow us to establish a trust, for instance, that would allow us to begin the accounting, would allow us to begin the investment piece for recipients, that could all start. And so that was trying to work with Ledge Council to fine tune that language to allow us all the powers in the bill, but only if we can secure the funding. So if we don't secure the funding sufficient to run a program, then this will remain, remain on paper, for lack of a better term, until we either get a funding source or get the funding. And so, that's the high level.
Yeah, Justin, I don't think we need to put this in statute, but can you tell us how you would think about a smaller pot of money in a pilot? Would it be directed at a particular county or just a certain number of children who are born when it goes live?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a little bit, it is hypothetical because it's a bit of a sliding scale. But I think, for instance, if you look at the counties with the highest number of babies born per year with Dr. Dinosaur, I believe it is Essex, Orleans, and Caledonia, for instance. And they have, depending on the numbers every year, I believe somewhere between 30 people in I think it's Essex County. And if you add them all together, it could be up to 200 babies. So I think some of it depends on the pot of money before we could determine the pilot. But I think there's several ways using the eligibility standards in the bill. I think there are several ways, if we could find a large amount of money, then I think obviously could have a large pilot project. I think some of it is at some point it'll have to be a decision on how many funds have been secured and do we have a sufficient population. But frankly, there are definitely under the eligibility, there are going to be babies born every day once this law goes into effect who are eligible. So it just becomes a question of how much funding can be secured to make a pilot project, which I think, obviously we would like it to be larger. Any amount of pilot project, I think the office will still get the benefit of working out the kinks of how do we communicate with families? How do we work on the investments? How do we handle the accounting? All of the sort of pieces that we would need to fully comprehend and control once a program was implemented. I think any small amount of pilot project, or hopefully a larger one, we would still gain the benefit, plus the recipients obviously eventually gain the benefit, but we would gain the benefit of being able to, this works, maybe we need to come back and request a language change here. And so it's really our hope that that we can identify a source of money.
Great. Other questions for Justin?
That's very helpful.
Yeah.
And I appreciate the pivot and,
Yeah,
yes,
me too.
still moving forward.
So we'll see that language in a walkthrough later. But and I will say I probably glanced at it, but I haven't seen it either. So we might have a few further questions if we feel there's any tweaks we need to make. But I think people are generally okay with the concept.
Yes, and it adds to all our work in trying to make generational change in poverty in this state. And we're doing it with housing, and we're doing it in a lot of different areas, but this is another key initiative, I think.
Well, the key might be to follow it up and see if it does make it.
Exactly. Hence my afternoon
Yeah.
committee where we have government accountability.
Right.
We're not gonna wait 18 years for that,
Yeah.
but
We're getting there. Joint
Yeah,
business, maybe I think we're gonna actually have a home
Yeah,
for
yeah.
it, and
We're gonna have a gap bill?
yes, we have a tax bill that's putting it, yeah.
How do we do that?
More to follow.
great. I think this is exciting, and there is a real interest in following up on child tax credits and things that combat poverty. So we're really excited to partner with you on this, and we'll look at the language in a little bit. Thanks so much, Justin.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for joining us.
we're gonna switch gears to Department of Labor with the kind of overall. I think, so Cameron, I'm sorry about, your emergency and being away.
Yeah.
I hope you're doing
It's
okay.
good to be back though.
It is. I will say I need to sort of ground myself in. I think you sent some requested changes to Davian that we should go through.
And I can talk a little bit about what you have and some
Okay.
comments.
Yeah, all of the above.
Yeah.
I'm thinking people should be sharing their screen, is that right? We don't,
Or John gonna walk.
well, that's later.
I'm having the new draft printed now.
Oh, okay, oh, you have it, okay. Okay, so we're working off the same.
The new draft, 55.
And yeah, to be fair, like, when, we talked about some housekeeping stuff, so I just passed it right on to Damien, and I haven't adjusted it either, so nothing is set in stone in this bill, it's just easier to look at it in one bill.
I may not have seen your latest draft, so I'm looking.
We haven't seen it,
2.2.
okay.
Yes,
And
that's what we have.
sorry, just to be clear, there are no changes to any of the sections you would be looking at in the latest, the sole changes in the latest participating clause sections. Okay.
Oh, really? Because, so we had a 2.2 that had your changes that Damien made and posted. I don't, when did you?
There are some other sections we would like in the bill or
Uh-huh.
things that we would like you to take up.
Okay.
I would comment on them.
Yeah,
I fully recognize where you're at in the session and your desire to.
I'm trying to sound like I know what I'm talking about right now.
Or not, exactly. So,
Yeah, okay,
Um,
well, I had treated those as friendly enough to look at, and I gave them to Damien, but it's okay, cause I don't know what's happening, like drafts, so.
Okay.
You might need to put up the screen if you have.
I
like,
don't
Okay.
have anything written to share. If I can, and I'm happy to work with Damien, it's more concepts at this
Okay.
point.
Great.
So for the record, Cameron Wood, I'm the Policy and Legislative Affairs Director for the Department of Labor. Happy to be here with you this morning. Thank you for your kind words. So I'm just gonna try to be brief and succinct, walk through what you have, and just kind of make comments along the way. So H55, it is a strike all, and you've added some additional provisions that we had asked to be introduced in the House. Some of the conversations that we've been having with Vermont Legal Aid, even again, as of last night and this morning. So there's a few pieces that I'm thinking we're still trying to work through, knowing that you all might be trying to move this quicker than later, but the first piece is there on page 1. It's just currently we have the ability to relieve employers of benefit charges when it's related to a natural disaster. That's limited to only 4 weeks. The past 2 natural disasters we've gone through, which would have been Hurricane Irene 10 plus years ago, and then the disasters from this past summer, really indicate to us that 4 weeks is not really sufficient. Most natural disasters that get to that level of impact aren't 4 weeks is not really going to be sufficient. So we're asking to extend that. I think that's relatively straightforward, and I can move on from there. Yes, ma'am.
What about the COVID pandemic?
So-
We shut people down.
But we did, if you remember, we relieved all employers of all charges in calendar year
Okay, so
2020 because of that.
We do that now.
We do not. We came to you and
And
you
we-
and the legislature worked with us to enact that.
It worked. all
Generally
through this-
September
At that time,
spring.
yes, ma'am.
Yes, we did go.
We generally do not have the authority to waive charges. This is a recognition of when there is a disaster, employers are not at fault, there should be a period of relief.
So they just ask, why do you not have that authority? Is that a federal authority? Because most of
It's just, we can relieve if it's appropriate, if somebody voluntarily separates and the employer is incorrectly charged for that, we will relieve them of that. We don't have the authority to just blanket waive benefit charges.
so we have to give that to you.
Yes, ma'am.
It's not offended, okay. That's
Okay.
what we're doing. Yeah.
So then when you're looking at pages 2 through the bottom of 6, so this is waiver of overpayments and the authority to potentially waive overpayments for the Department of Labor. So I'm probably going to focus primarily, as I was talking with Wendy and Legal Aid this morning, I'll focus a little bit more on option 2.
Okay.
I think there's some tweaks.
Can you remind us, yours is option 2,
Um,
or yours, I
it's a
just
little
need
bit
to
of a
know.
mix of both. I think
Okay.
in talking with, and I apologize, Mindy, in referencing you on the record here, but in speaking with legal aid,
Yeah,
this morning, we had met earlier in the session. We had started to try to work on language to come to consensus.
Mhm.
I think there's some things we may not come to consensus on, which is fine.
Mhm.
I had promised to try to work with them throughout, after that first initial meeting. I just wasn't able
Sure.
to get with them, and I've been out for the past few weeks. So option 2, I think, is the one to focus on. There's a few tweaks we would like to see.
Can we focus on, can we just do that? So it begins on page 4 of 2.
Sean,
Yes,
can you,
yes, ma'am.
like,
So-
write it down?
Just the
Or
first
the
thing,
tweet, did you send, have you sent us for tweets?
I haven't sent anything.
Okay, okay,
And I can,
okay.
but,
Need someone to be writing down the tweets,
it's just the,
or
so
unless you're sending something in writing.
I can send something today. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So on line 9, it's the commissioner shall waive the full amount. We'd really like to have more permissive authority there. We may waive up to the full amount, something to that
Okay.
effect. I can envision situations where it's appropriate to waive the full amount. I can also envision situations where it's appropriate to waive less than the full amount. And this is really telling us we have to waive it in all instances.
Okay,
So that's one. I was speaking with legal aid this morning about the sub 2 here. So this is line 15 through 17. I don't have language because I need to work with them on language.
Okay.
Because,
We appreciate
there needs
that.
to be a what I envision, I don't want to happen is there's a situation where somebody can just request multiple waivers whenever they want, regardless of what the decision is.
okay,
And so there's something there that I don't have it in my head of what the language will be, but I would like to work with them. We've even talked about
Okay.
trying to meet on Monday morning.
great,
So, there's just some piece there. The one piece I want to highlight that we're just not gonna be supportive of, we being the department, and we would like you to remove the language, is on the bottom of page 5. So this is the sub I.
Right?
So this says that the commissioner shall not attempt to recover an overpayment or withhold any amounts of unemployment benefits from a person until after essentially this language says the entire appeal period is exhausted for an overpayment waiver. We're not supportive of that for just a few quick reasons. For starters, the claimant has already been given the opportunity in due process. So,
At this
We
point
don't-
in the process.
yes, ma'am, we cannot put someone in overpayment until we have given them notice, given them the opportunity for a hearing, given them the opportunity to present evidence in support or against, and then made a determination. And then they have the ability to appeal that all the way to the Supreme Court. So what we're talking about here is after that entire process is played out,
after the Supreme Court?
if they choose to go there.
Yeah.
Okay,
But after the overpayment determination has been written, they've had their hearing and opportunity for a hearing. Now they're coming in and saying, I want to request a waiver of the overpayments. And that's fine, we're supportive of that. But what I don't want is I don't want us, the department, to then be somehow restricted in our ability to go out and collect what the claimant owes to us while that waiver request is under review. Just so you know, these things, when they go from the department review all the way to the Supreme Court, this can take over a year and a half.
yes,
And so,
Sort of like other things.
yes,
what I'm not supportive of is the claimant's already been given due process and the opportunity to present why the overpayment shouldn't be established in the first place.
Mhm.
We've established that they were overpaid and that they have they have legal requirement to pay it back. I don't want to, prohibit and bind our ability to go collect that money while they're requesting a waiver. That makes
so they are going all the way to the Supreme Court. They can. So they're like a year out. And then you want to be able to collect the overpayment.
We can collect an overpayment after a final determination on the overpayment itself. So what happens is, this is how it will work. If we get information that indicates that somebody's been overpaid benefits, we will initiate an investigation. We will notify usually the claimant, we will usually notify the employer. If the employer is involved, we gather all the facts. We allow the claimant the opportunity to meet with our staff in a hearing, present evidence. They then make a written determination. We issue that to the claimant. Claimant has 30 days to appeal it. At whatever point that appeal process ends, they don't appeal it. After 30 days, the determination becomes final. They do appeal it.
So, okay, stop there. So the determination becomes final after
Now-
they don't engage in the appeal period. That's one point where you would collect the
At that
overpayment.
point, we would begin collection of the overpayment.
Okay, then if they appeal it, the appeal goes straight to the Supreme Court.
If they appeal it within their appeal window,
Mhm.
the process is it goes to an administrative law judge.
Oh, then I thought
Then
it
it,
was kind
yeah,
of.
then it goes to the
Okay.
board,
Mhm.
our Employment Security Board, and then it can go to the Supreme Court. If they choose not to appeal it within that 30 days, it's final. They can't appeal it after that.
And you're saying you wanna retain that right to seek overpayment
What I'm saying
if they
is,
don't appeal?
once that determination is final, we
Mhm.
then start the collection process.
Mhm.
What this language is saying is after that, the claimant can come in and say, I can't appeal my overpayment because the appeal period is exhausted or they've gone all the way to the Supreme Court and it's been upheld.
Mhm.
I want you to waive the overpayment. What this language says is it takes away our ability to collect
Okay,
while they're requesting that waiver. And I'm
It
not,
delays the
it
refund.
delays our ability to collect the overpayment.
okay.
So I don't have an issue with them requesting an overpayment waiver. We are supportive of the concept and we were one of the ones who kind of brought this in conjunction with legal aid to, to the legislature, but I just don't want to prohibit our ability to then collect while the waiver is under review.
Mhm. Okay, Senator Harris.
Thank you. So the second part of the sentence on line 21, or withhold any amounts of unemployment insurance benefits from a person. Could you talk about that a little bit, and if those benefits are necessarily the same, that benefits that they would be appealing?
So offsetting UI claimants benefits is actually one of our most effective ways of collecting overpayments. So the way the current system works is that we filed, we determine that you've been in overpayment, we put you in overpayment. At any point you come back through the door, whether it's during that benefit year or a future subsequent year, we offset your benefits at 100% until we pay the overpayment back.
An offset means not pay them.
If your weekly benefit amount is
Yeah.
$500 a
Make sure.
week, we take that $500 and put it towards your overpayment.
And did you notify the people that you're doing?
Absolutely, yes. So one thing I'm also supportive of though, in this bill, if you look at the top of page 7, this was a request, if you will, or a concept from legal aid
Mhm.
to limit our offset ability to 50%. And I'm fully, we as a department have talked about that and we're supportive of that. Recognizing that somebody who has now lost their job again,
Mhm.
they don't have income, they need money to help put food on the table, etc. So we are supportive of saying we're gonna limit our ability to offset future benefits and cap it at 50%. So in that instance, your weekly benefit amount is $500, we're only gonna take $250, we're still gonna give you $250 and still allow you the opportunity to collect. So
And you would decide that, or your agents?
our
Decide
system, if this language went into statute, we would program the system that is good, it caps at 50. So it would just be an automatic.
Oh,
Last thing I'll mention on this is that.
On this or in general?
On the 50%
Okay,
cap there on
yeah.
the top of page 7,
Mhm.
that is a piece that I request that the committee make effective in the future. And I'm happy to give you a date. It needs to be effective with our new system. This is not something we can do with the current system that we have.
Okay, so we'll need a date.
And how many years now are we waiting for that?
That's another conversation, but if you can give us a ballpark date, that's probably good.
And we're in process, right?
We are hopeful to have a new system within the next 36 months.
Okay.
actually operational in 3 years.
Yes.
We don't have time to look at all of that.
Yeah.
We have a lot of topics to cover. Is that it? Okay.
Few of the very quick things.
Okay.
So I mentioned, the top of page 8, this is the, fraud prevention measures. I believe this language is coming from Senator Brock. I had so
So
much
sorry, where are
information.
we with the fraud? Because I know there's some issues with that.
This is the top of page eight. I was gonna say,
Oh.
I prepared so much information in anticipation of all his
Oh, here
questions
it is.
related to this topic, and
Yeah.
unfortunately, he's not
I
here
don't
this
know if you
morning.
can hear about it.
So,
Well, there's some issues with it too.
so I'd be happy to come back. I have information I can share,
Okay,
Senator Clarkson, we can share with you.
Okay, you've
Um,
chatted with legal aid.
Yes,
Sidebar.
I will
Okay.
say this right now, the way it's worded, it says if someone is found to have committed fraud, they would be prohibited from collecting benefits for 5 years. I think 5 years on an initial determination of fraud may be a little
Little
Mhm.
much.
Mhm.
too heavy. We have seen other states that have a little bit more of a tiered system. If you put in there up to 5 years, we could put something in rule.
What do you think about the $5,000?
I am supportive of that, because currently the thing that we run into is, the way the system is designed, it says the department, if somebody's found to have committed fraud,
Mhm.
they have to pay the benefit back.
Mhm.
We're legally required to add a 15% penalty on top of that. That's a federal law requirement. That money goes into the UI trust fund. Currently, the department has two options. We can either add additional administrative penalties,
Mhm.
financial penalties, or we can give them what are called penalty weeks. We follow the penalty weeks path.
Mhm.
So if you're found to have committed fraud on 6 weeks of benefits, we will put you in overpayment, add the 15% penalty, then we'll give you 6 penalty weeks to account for the 6 weeks you committed fraud. What that means is it prohibits you from collecting for 6 weeks. That's what the penalty week is for.
Yeah.
We would like to get away from that. We would like to
Yeah.
move back
Replace it with-
towards an administrative penalty.
Okay.
So that's why I'm supportive of the up to 5,000.
Okay, do you give us like an annual report on fraud cases?
No, ma'am, but we can give you ongoing information if you would like. So we have our annual UI trust fund report, for example, and we've been adding information to that over the past few years. If that's something that you would like to see, that's information that we can absolutely put in
If
there.
there's something you can send us over the weekend so we can understand the scope of the problem. If you're worried that it would be in a form that we might not quite be able to gather just from a document what's happening, which are my favorite topics, I got wrong. You know, I don't know, I don't wanna make a decision on something if you think it's not a standalone document per se, but, I think maybe we look for more information as we make a decision about this, and maybe more information before we take something like this up. So maybe that report will help inform us if we feel like we have enough information to do this section or not.
I know this is a lot of information here, so what I'm happy to do is I will kind of put this together in hopefully a succinct document, just kind of outlining a few of the pieces I mentioned this morning, especially because I think the overpayment waivers and then this fraud section here somewhat go hand in hand in some respects, so
Yeah.
I will try to pull the information as well as the fraud information and the overpayment information that I drafted, and I'll get that to you.
Thank you, Senator Cummings.
Seems to me if two kinds of fraud. One is an individual and two individuals who figure out a way how to falsify things and get, are massively generous unemployment insurance. It also seems that during COVID, we had some pretty systemic, widespread fraud. I'm happy that you turned down my application for my 3 weeks at a fish hatchery in Alaska, but I never applied. Somebody was applying in my name. And that to me is another, that was probably nationwide.
Yes, we
Very-
found that.
Very briefly, I
yeah.
would just say, Senator, you're spot on. There are 2 types of fraud that we combat. The first is identity theft fraud. I feel that we do a fairly good job at combating that. There are things that get through, especially during the pandemic. I don't know if you all remember, I think it was former
We
Governor
spent a lot
Howard
of time
Dean
on
had
this.
like 7
Oh.
applications submitted in his name. We are always looking to ways that we can, have more robust identity protection. So when those frauds happen, there's not an impact to the individual. So in your situation, if benefits have been paid out, we're not coming at you to repay those benefits. And so the other fraud that we have is the claimant is misrepresenting their separation, misrepresenting not reporting their wages, continuing to work while they're filing for unemployment. That's the primary fraud that we deal with, and that's what this section would stress. So the people that we find have committed fraud and receiving benefits, they are who they say they are, but they're committing fraudulent acts to receive additional benefits. Those are the people that we try to focus on.
And I think we looked, and perhaps you may have discussed this, about what some of the history of these kinds of payments have been. There was a 10-year period, you recall, we looked at, which,
Yes, sir.
and during that period of time, there was $55 billion worth of payments made that were essentially invalid and improper payments.
Yes, sir.
Now, some of that was fraud, some of that was mistake. And when we brought this up, this fraud provision has been up this, third time, I think. And the first time, the issue raised by some advocates was that we wanted to make sure that we didn't include people who simply made a mistake. And hopefully this is drawn narrowly enough to be able to deal with that. We also, though, wanted to deal with cases that I think Cameron was able to document and talk specifically about some instances in which individuals did in fact engage in fraudulent behavior, did in fact steal money. And what raised it to the surface at the time was that one of those individuals was back again asking for unemployment benefits. And that's what kind of triggered the look at it. One of the things that I am thinking a lot about this fraud provision is to perhaps also include something that makes it clear that there are certain egregious circumstances that should be treated under the state's general fraud laws and should be prosecuted by the Attorney General for criminal prosecution. This is a very light touch in this bill the way it is right now.
Okay, do we have a number of years that you're ineligible? So there's no number of years.
After fraud. I
Okay,
thought you just told us it was.
Oh,
that was
under
over
5
payments.
years.
We will,
Right.
so currently we will put something on called penalty weeks, but we do not prohibit somebody who has committed fraud from
Mhm.
coming back through the door and becoming eligible. There are other states that do that, and like I
Okay.
said, it's usually a tiered approach.
Mhm.
I believe are in our region, Connecticut and Maine, if you get up to 3 instances where the department has found that you have committed UI fraud,
Mhm.
you are prohibited indefinitely from filing again.
Okay,
So
maybe get us some of that language as an example or suggestion. We do have to move on. I see we have Kelly Kazmarski. We don't have time to get into the fraud piece right now. We can think about it over the weekend. But there's this one area of disagreement.
We're gonna meet on Monday, so I don't.
So
they're
even
in
the area of
conversation.
disagreement,
I think we should just meet on all areas of disagreement.
okay, great. I didn't know if that one piece was kind of a yes or no. Great, that, we like to hear that. We're gonna move on.
I like
Thank you,
the
Cameron.
up to. I think that the up to would be a good addition to that prop. Pretty tough. So.
If you wanna throw in this fraud discussion, I mean, I think maybe there's some desire to see a number of years or at some point a consequence.
A consequence.
So maybe that would be something good to present with like an annual fraud report.
Just a quick
Yeah.
question.
Yeah.
You can tell me later. Are there consequences to the state if the state underpays?
Underpays?
Yeah,
If we
I mean,
underpay
it
someone?
seems like it would be fair,
So if we ever find that we have underpaid somebody, we will make them whole.
but there's no, like, if it's years later, months later, weeks later.
I will say this, at any time during a benefit year, if we find someone has been underpaid, we will make them whole.
Or not paid,
So that's
or
indefinite.
delayed, I'm just,
Okay.
somebody should say.
Yeah.
Because I know our system is not perfect.
Right,
And I know you're working on it.
Yeah, I'm happy to chat with you
Yes.
offline. Madam Chair, there are some other comments. You got other witnesses to get to, so
Yeah.
I'll step out of the chair.
You think they're minor or something?
Other sections of the bill that we're not supportive of, et cetera, I'm happy to send that to you in writing. if
That's great,
more
just send it to
helpful.
the committee in writing.
Okay.
And we'll.
Can you give us
take
a-
that up very fine.
A quick notion of what you're not
Okay, yeah.
Very quickly,
Coming out,
so I'm speaking a little bit more on behalf of the administration here. Some of the department doesn't necessarily administer some of these provisions,
Okay.
but I will highlight the section that expands the workers' comp presumption for certain state employees that have PTSD. The administration has testified not in support of that. Not-
And we haven't even discussed that yet, because we lost, Steve Howard's on, but
Yep.
we didn't get to him
So
last
let's
time,
wait until
so.
we have.
So I can circle back
Yeah,
to some
well,
of those
we'll,
things.
we'll hear from him and you can put that in writing. Mhm.
Okay, great.
I'll leave with that.
That's perfect. Thank you. Bill, I just wanna quickly, I know that, as we look at this compromise piece, you just wanted to raise some flags about rating for businesses. Did you wanna say more?
Sure, I could give like a 30-second
Okay,
flag and
Yeah,
then follow up
thank
with folks.
yeah.
Sure, thank you very much. Record Williams, Nestor and Associated Industries of Vermont, you've done a shape of time. And I think frankly Cameron touched upon several of our concerns with the waiver section. Basically, we agree with clarifying that you could waive forward in part. One thing which we need to clarify whether the language in there really captures this, but I think there's a situation where a recipient or a beneficiary has not done anything deliberately wrong, but a reasonable person would have known or should have known that they were getting more than they should have. That should be able to factor into the determination of eligibility for waiver. Again, on the whether you cannot get back, but also you cannot withhold benefits until after the resolution. I think if the department knows that they are overpaying, they should be able to stop overpaying while everything is being resolved. Again, that's a detail you have to try to work out.
Okay.
What that would
So
mean.
you might be able to give your input to the Monday.
Yes, excellent. And I don't know if there's already existing statute that would cover this, but if we're going to be introducing this possibility of having reclamation waived, then I would just want to make sure that the issue of experience rating for the employer involved is addressed.
Okay,
You've had it, well,
Yeah.
so do you.
And then it may not be necessary for statute or even a session law. It may already be part of the regular reporting, but it would be good to include in the reports that the department gives, how is this process working, how much money are we talking about?
okay.
On the fraud piece.
On the overpayment
On the overpayment.
piece.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's it.
Thank you. Thanks, Bill. So now everyone's heard this, we'll file it away and maybe you can kind of underscore or sure some of that gets discussed on that day.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we're gonna move on to firefighters. I think Chris should be.
Yeah, so-
You know everybody else in the room.
I do,
let
so
me
I
know.
think for the sake of time,
Mhm.
Madam Chair, I'd like to yield it to Dr. Hamrock. who's the
Okay,
Physician.
just say your name for the record.
Chris Doobie, just for the record, Chris Doobie, President of Professional Firefighters Vermont. I want to yield my time to Dr. Hamrock, who's graciously accepted to speak to you
Mhm.
all briefly and let you know about the screening and so forth. So,
Okay. And let's do some context setting. We received a large report and a compelling report about both career and volunteer firefighter exposure to PFAS and cancer level, PFAS and other carcinogens and higher rates of cancer. I think we're compelled by the data and the need to find resources and start doing more testing to catch this earlier and help our folks who put their lives on the line for their communities. And there was a request for detail about which type of screening balances, efficacy and actual detection and cost effectiveness as we try to think about the money we have available. I really don't want to put it in those terms because life is invaluable. But it helps us figure out how we might find some revenue for a pilot and fit this into the last negotiations of the budget and stuff. Dr. Hamrock, welcome.
Thank you for the invite, and thank you, Chris, as well, and appreciate spending some time with you this morning to talk about the unique risk firefighters have for cancer and why these screening tests are imperative. I'm going to do a brief PowerPoint to kind of review these topics. Thank you. Is that coming up on your end?
Not yet, no.
Says host disabled participant screen sharing.
We'll fix that. One moment. Okay, you should be able to do it now.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Great, we can see it.
Okay, good. So again, my name is Michael Hamrock. I'm a primary care doctor in Boston. I take care of a lot of first responders, also a former Boston firefighter, medical director of the Boston Fire Department. And, I do a lot of early detection screenings on first responders in Boston. We've found a lot of early heart disease and cancer and saved many firefighters' lives because they had these tests in addition to their regular physicals that really do not cover these necessary tests. And I'll go over that as well. I believe, based on my experiences, I think these tests will help save the lives of Vermont firefighters. We now know that early detection has a 4 times better survival rate than the late stage cancers. And you all know the tremendous toll that the loss of a firefighter has on family members from occupational cancer. And I believe these tests will also save taxpayers from Vermont a lot of money because we find these cancers early. It's much less costly to the state and individual municipalities as well by finding these cancers early in a more treatable stage, less costly, and hopefully keep the firefighter working. I think these tests will also allow firefighters to be more safe on the fire ground. And the other good thing about these tests, once you have a diagnosis, now the insurance company owns them. The state may start, a pilot program of getting these screening tests done, but if you find a lung nodule in a firefighter with these screening tests, now they have that diagnosis of a lung nodule, and the insurance company has to follow up with regular screenings on that firefighter after that. So they are beneficial to get that done. And again, as a firefighter in Boston, I lost too many good colleagues and friends from occupational cancer. And I believe needlessly, and if we had these early screening tests back then, I think a lot of these firefighters would be alive today. And that's why I'm so passionate about Vermont firefighters getting these tests as well. We all know firefighters are a great occupation. Unfortunately, firefighters do pay a tremendous price for being part of this occupation with many illnesses, whether it be cancer, heart disease, mental health issues. And despite coming on the job very fit, passing the physical exam and going through the academy, we see the health of firefighters really break down not too soon after graduating, and this is what we need to help prevent and screen for. The National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health did a major study on firefighter cancers across the country, 30,000 firefighters, and they found that firefighters have a 9% higher rate of cancer than the general population and a 14% higher death rate. And again, these are healthy people coming on the job and much more healthy than the general population. So that's a significant concern. And Boston, we have 3 cancers. Every 3 weeks, we have a new cancer in our firefighters. And we recently had 3 firefighters die from occupational cancer. And each cancer case costs the city over $250,000, sometimes up to $500,000 with the cost of treatment, the overtime, because we have minimal staffing. And we spend over $5 million a year just on cancer itself. And we can do a much better job and have a prevention program to save lives and save money as well. So the World Health Organization just declared firefighting as a group 1 carcinogen. In other words, being a firefighter now is considered a cancer-causing occupation. And this just came out in 2023 after all the research in cancer and firefighters. So it's well proven now that firefighters, because of their exposures on the job, have a very high risk for cancer, much more than most occupations. So that's why we need to screen firefighters early, because of these very high risk for cancers. Massachusetts, Governor Baker, before he left, signed a bill that offer more protection for firefighters who develop cancer from the job. There's more benefits. We had 300 active duty firefighters get diagnosed with cancer 2 years before this bill was passed. But there's not just funding for the benefits, but also more early detection screenings, which I think are as important. And I'm glad these are in effect in our state.
Dr. Camera, can we pause on the Massachusetts law? Does Massachusetts, I think we heard the answer to this at some point, but Massachusetts has volunteer firefighters in its more rural areas, and do they get covered or discussed in this law?
That's a good question. It's kind of up to each municipality to decide if they're going to cover them for these things. Like the western part of our state, you're right, there's a lot more volunteer firefighters, but it's up to each municipality to agree to cover them with what the governor introduced.
And each municipality might also decide if they're doing preemptive screenings in kind of a patchwork way.
Yeah, every municipality is different. We try to have some recommended screenings for both volunteer and paid firefighters to go through these aggressive physicals, but also fund the early detection screening tests, which, sometimes there's a misconception of a volunteer firefighter in a community that doesn't have many fire calls, but there's still, every call they're exposed to puts them at high risk, whether it be, 3 or 4 fires a year, whether it be, 20 fires a year. It's, the cancer does not discriminate on each fire scene. So I think it's important that they be covered as well.
Senator Harrison?
Yeah, it's a similar question in this vein. Thank you so much for being here. Have you looked at the exposure to the gear?
Yeah.
In the regular training and tried to, oh, are you looking at that? I was just wondering if you've changed the processes that are used in the training so that you reduce the exposure that way.
It's a great question for the slide.
Okay.
Yeah, no, the past several years, the fire service is much more aware of the cancer risk in firefighters. And a lot of our training has to do with raising awareness, but also having firefighters better protect themselves on the fire ground, in the firehouse, and in their own home as well. And I can go over those briefly with you. In some of the risk factors that firefighters have, the flame retardants on every furniture in your house is covered with chemicals that are designed to prevent the fire spread. But we know when it combusts, it gives off these cancer-causing chemicals. We also know that just hanging around the firehouse, not going to fires, a diesel exhaust causes cancer in firefighters. We had one firehouse in Boston, 3 firefighters out of 38 members in the North End all developed kidney cancer within a year and a half. And in that firehouse, the kitchen was right off the main floor, and the diesel exhaust particles was piled right into the kitchen, and the wall was covered with soot from the diesel exhaust, and I believe it contributed to their kidney cancers as well. Other studies in firefighters show working overnight shifts disrupt your circadian rhythm, put you at risk. More stress in firefighters, and the PFAS that was mentioned earlier is a dangerous chemical that is in firefighter foam, it's in firefighter gear, it's in firehouse dust that's causing cancers in our firefighters as well. So what is the mechanism? The inhalation, ingestion, absorption of toxins through the lungs, mouth, and skin that are causing cancer in firefighters. All these chemicals make their way into the bloodstream. They travel to different organs. They set up cell damage and mutations, and cancer develops several years later. If there was a fire last night in Montpelier, if you were around the firefighters on Sunday, you could still smell traces of smoke coming from their skin. And that's all these dangerous chemicals, making their way through the body and out of the skin. But sometimes it just sticks around, and it leads to cell damage and cancer in firefighters several years later. So these are the high-risk cancers we see in firefighters: respiratory, digestive, urogenital, skin cancers, and blood cancers. And a lot of these are not picked up by a regular screening test. And that's why we need to get these additional early detection screenings. With a lot of new research now on women firefighters, as we're getting more and more women in the fire service, and they have significant concerns for cancers as well, including cancer of the thyroid, lymphoma, melanoma. And also, unfortunately, we see birth defects now with female firefighters because of their exposures on the fire ground, all very concerning. Why we need more screenings as well. We talked earlier about the PFAS chemicals. They're everywhere, they're in Teflon products, but they are in firefighter foam. They're also in all the layers of the bunker gear. And when the firefighter uses the bunker gear, whether it be exposed to heat or ultraviolet light, all these chemicals come off the gear. The firefighters inhale them, ingest them, absorb them through the skin. And again, they make their way through the bloodstream and cause cancer. And that's a huge concern. We see a higher risk of testicular and kidney cancer, especially from the PFAS chemicals. And also there's some newer studies that show additional cancers as well. We're also seeing very concerning numbers of cancer in younger firefighters now, most likely from these exposures from the PFAS. We're seeing more younger people in the general population as well develop cancer, and these are concerns. Why we need more aggressive early detection screenings. So this is, you mentioned earlier about what are we teaching our firefighters? We teach our firefighters anytime you step off the apparatus, you go into a fire building, you have to look at it as a hazmat building because all the chemicals that you're exposed to, that you got to think walking into this building is potentially going to give me cancer. So I need to use my breathing apparatus, need to wear my hoods, use the wet maps after exiting to get rid of some of the soot up the bunker gear, and keep the air bottles on throughout the fire scene. Go back to the firehouse, take a shower within an hour, get all the soot off the body, wash the hoods and the gloves, and also drink a lot of water to hopefully get rid of some of the toxins through the body, through the urine and stool as well. So we're really pushing our firefighters to get these comprehensive physical exams and really educate our primary doctors about the unique risks that firefighters have. And we're, as in Massachusetts, we're getting some early detection screenings through the state as well, which I believe is very necessary. This is a physical exam I put together for the firefighters that now is used across the country for the early prostate blood screenings, lung scans, early colonoscopies, early mammograms for our female firefighters because of the high risk as well. But these early detection screenings, I don't want firefighters to feel I'll get these scans and I'll be all set. You still got to go through a comprehensive physical exam, and but I feel that the typical exam that firefighters go through, whether it be NFPA 1582, the typical U.S. Task Force physicals, is inadequate for firefighters because of the unique risks of cancer. They only pick up about 30% of cancers with the typical screenings that are now done. And we know lung scans actually recently have shown reduced deaths by 20%, which is pretty remarkable, these lung CAT scans. And so we need to screen firefighters for these cancers that they're getting, the lungs, the digestive system, urogenital system. That's why these early detection screening tests are necessary in our firefighters. You might have heard about these multi-cancer early detection blood tests called Gileri. They actually can find 50 different types of cancer with one blood test. Again, in addition to a firefighter physical exam, I think they are helpful for these high-risk folks because the traditional screening tests miss about 70% of cancers.
And do these have a ballpark cost everywhere around the country?
What's that?
Is there a rough cost?
Yeah, so
per test?
Yeah, so these tests are not quite covered by insurance companies yet. They're starting to be, but right now, if you were the general public, they're about $900 for these blood tests. They do for firefighters and first responders. They drop them down to, I believe, $600. Again, I think for high risk folks like firefighters who cannot find cancer with the typical screening tests we do, I think these tests are effective. Over 15,000 firefighters across the country have gone through these tests so far, and a lot of early cancers were found in stage 1 and 2. Particularly the cancers that are not picked up by a screening test, like the pancreas, the liver, the ovaries that aren't typically picked up with our screening test. So I believe that's why these tests are effective.
Okay, we have a question, and I just want to make sure I understand that if we were encouraging our folks to look at different tests, there's a significant difference in your mind between like a $300 test and this $600 test. in terms of catching cancers that are and more endemic or, you know, more found in firefighters?
Yeah, so this mentioned test here, Galeri, it's a very unique test. It detects 50 different types of cancer, and it's actually is now, in a lot of big medical centers. Dana-Farber Cancer Institute is going through a pilot program on this test for high-risk folks. So it's becoming much more accepted in the medical community than it was a couple of years ago. And I'm hoping a couple of years from now, it will be part of our insurance plan. It's just like getting a cholesterol level once it's going to be accepted, particularly for high-risk folks.
Yes, tell us how that's going for you, because we have
Yeah, because
interest in the thing.
we just were exchanging the thought that we might do that next year and put in a bill to have it ensure that it's covered by insurance next year. Don't think we can do that this year.
Can I ask,
Can I just say,
sure,
I think $600 is a lot less than some of the tests we initially were talking about, the MRIs and, there were.
Yeah, so initially I proposed roughly $1,000, which is
Yeah.
the gallery and
Yeah,
the ultrasound.
yeah, the
Those are-
ultrasound.
Yeah, so those are like New Hampshire's using now, a lot of the departments between two, because the ultrasound also looks at cardiac issues too.
okay,
Right.
Right,
And they
right.
diagnose,
Physical.
risk of aortic aneurysm, cardiac enlargement, stuff like that. They also look at pathology related to.
Okay,
But between the two,
okay.
Right.
it'd be gold.
So Dr. Hamrock, that $1,000 in terms of a full kind of physical, but really concentrating on these types of cancers is something that you think would be like the gold standard to offer even like, to volunteers and people where we're just trying to figure out the right cost to be the most useful.
No, that's correct. In addition to the comprehensive physical exam, I don't want to say they should not be getting those. That's extremely important as
Yeah.
well. But these
Yeah.
other tests that target these unique cancers that firefighters are getting, I think they are important. That blood test we just talked about, and a lung scan, I believe is helpful, and the ultrasounds that Chris just talked about, I think for firefighters is necessary. And then again, it's sometimes just one cost where once there's a diagnosis, now the insurance company owns it after that. So that's something you have to think about. That is going to be helpful as well, even as a pilot program. A lot of the tests will determine early lung nodules that now the insurance company will pay for more scans every 6 months, every year.
Okay, we might have to start sort of wrapping up and moving in a particular direction on this. I was wondering if you have a slide on, I don't think we'd be too prescriptive. I think we'd hand that over to the experts. But do you find that there's a certain demographic where it's really important to do the screenings, like a certain age or, a certain number of exposures?
Right. It's usually, we look at about 10 years on the job, which is where we really see the effects of cancer developing. So that's, I probably would not recommend these screening tests for someone coming on the job because they haven't been exposed yet. But these early detection screening tests, for someone 10 plus years on the job, is when we start seeing some changes that we want to find these diseases early in a treatable stage, so we get the firefighter, treated and back to work, and hopefully live a long, healthy career and many years in retirement.
The wrinkle for us is if we're trying to help our volunteer firefighters, the average age is like 60 or something. I don't know if we have any volunteer firefighters in the group, but we're trying to figure out how to balance the age demographic issue in our volunteer firefighters. And I didn't know if that's something you could comment on.
Yeah, no, it's another good point. Some of the municipalities are saying 10 years on the job or age 40 and plus. So that maybe you might consider that on your volunteer firefighters.
Great.
And then just wanna, if we could get an idea of the recommended frequency, that would be helpful too.
Yes, good.
So that's a good question on the frequency. The lung scans for smokers we're getting every year. But again, if they have the diagnosis of nodule, now the insurance company has to pay for it every year or every 6 months, depending on the size of the nodule. So the other test, ultrasounds is every 3 years probably. Now the blood test is still, a lot of research going on. What is the most effective for that is probably every 3 years as well.
Okay. We should probably do concluding thoughts here. I think this has been very comprehensive and helpful. But if there's anything we haven't gotten to,
Yeah, no, thanks, Pam. I'd just like to summarize, we now know that the World Health Organization is labeling firefighting as a cancer-causing occupation, and why we need these early screening tests, particularly for the high-risk cancer the firefighters are getting of the lungs, the gastrointestinal system, the genitourinary system, blood system, and the skin that need early detection. And the typical screening tests we get on firefighters would be NFPA 1582 or physicals are not adequate enough for firefighters because of the high risk. And I believe these tests will save the lives of Vermont firefighters and really eliminate some of the suffering that the family members have gone through when they lose a loved one to cancer. And in the long run, will save the taxpayers a lot of money if you can find these cancers at an early stage, would keep the firefighter working and less costly for treatments. And I think it also will help boost recruiting because a lot of people see these World Health Organizations literature. Do I want to start a job that's going to give me cancer, right? So the recruitment's down a bit with the fire service. So I think we get these early detection screenings. It's going to say we're taking care of our firefighters and doing the right things for them. So I think that's going to be helpful too. And I appreciate you having me on board and giving me a lot of time today to talk about this important issue that I'm very passionate about because I see it every day. I see it in my colleagues, and I think these early detection tests are extremely helpful for the fire service.
thank you, Dr. Hamrock, so much. I'm so impressed that you were a former firefighter and now the physician for the Boston Fire Department. Thank you for your great work and give your team our best. And this has been, I think, extremely helpful in setting our direction. And we hope to continue to be in touch through our local firefighters.
Yes,
Try to move something forward.
and key on recruitment, because one of the things.
Yes.
I mean, I think particularly for volunteers, they don't get too many perks.
Mm-hmm.
And so this would be a great additional perk, I think, for our younger firefighters. And people,
Perk or something else.
I was
that
gonna
an
say,
important
doesn't
benefit.
sound like-
okay, got it,
There you go.
okay, so perk is the wrong word. But I think it's an additional thing that would lend more comfort as they look and contemplate.
Something we owe them. So thank you so much, Dr. Hamrock. We really
Thank you very much.
appreciate it. We are not voting this bill out today. And thank you to, I think, all the firefighters who come today.
And for breakfast.
Oh, you
Thank
did
you for
breakfast. Where was
breakfast.
I?
I buy you breakfast any day, son.
Excuse me. 20 weeks pregnant today. Where's my breakfast?
Yeah, you know that, idiot.
That's true.
No, it's Wendy's
It's
muffin.
Wendy's muffin.
I brought it down.
But
when
if
you
you
were
would like to,
pregnant.
I
I
didn't even want my-
yeah, I was
Yeah.
running out of room.
Okay, we are behind, we have the chair of our companion committee in the room. So we do have to move on, but we are going to take this up. I'm looking at the chair of finance graciously because I'd like to find a little bit of tobacco money for this pilot. And she knows that, and the chair of appropriations knows that.
Okay, that I have not been talked to about. So,
I talked to Senator Lyons about it too,
Okay.
but,
well,
Okay.
we don't have a vehicle. Right?
this could be a vehicle.
This could be a vehicle.
And we
so-
can phase it in.
Right, so it is something to contemplate over the weekend, but I think,
Well, if you put something in it, they'll get it sent to me.
oh, I know.
And
That's
insurance
okay.
coverage for
I
next
think this
year.
was going to you anyway.
Insurance coverage to consider next year, the.
Yes, Senator Lyons was very keen on considering insurance coverage
That's up for
next year.
for the Gallia.
I would still like to get some funds allocated. So we'll continue to work on that. Yeah, we'll hear more next week.
Well, at least for the smoke.
At any time, I mean, I'm available and I reach out to my colleagues in Boston too and clarify stuff. I think we're headed in the right direction. And I'm grateful to Senator Clarkson for tagging us onto this bill. I mean,
Yeah,
No,
yeah,
this is good.
yeah.
Damien and I started right after the report came out.
yeah,
Do any of the other firefighters, do you want to say anything before you go?
I would just appreciate the opportunity for you guys listening and working on this.
Thank you.
Someone who said first time at the state house.
Oh my god, and you're here on Montpelier, so let's change that.
Oh, John's not with us
Did you want to say something?
Oh, John.
You guys are switching to 707, not John's coming back.
Okay.
Okay.
Great.
Thank
And
you
Rick,
to be
I know.
continued, and thank you for finding us a great expert in Dr. Hamrock. We appreciate it.
Yeah,
Thank you,
that was
Dr. Hamrock. You're
Thank you.
free to go as you need.
Thank you.
Enjoy Boston.
And we
Thank
would
you.
appreciate your time.
Thanks, everyone.
And please send your slides if you have.
I apologize, but I moved Steve Howard last time as well. Steve, if you're still there, just a quick, it's an easy to understand concept, so if you want to share it with us as we contemplate the SEA's position and the administration's position.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. So I think Damien did a really good job of explaining the language that is in draft 3.1. I believe it starts on page 15. In the current statute, there is a presumption for law enforcement and EMS personnel that if they are diagnosed by a mental health professional with PTSD, that it is presumed that it comes from their service. And this language simply extends that presumption to state employees who also, have very similar experiences to law enforcement and EMS professionals, particularly the Department of Corrections and the mental health facilities in the veterans home, the folks who are taking the 911 calls and having to stay on the phone until law enforcement is there, at the public service answering points, the dispatchers there, and our family service workers who are on a regular basis exposed to very traumatic situations. So we would just ask the committee to include this language that would expand the presumption to these very dedicated state employees in very high, I would say, stressful and traumatic occupations.
Quick question.
Yeah, is there any study that backs this up? I mean, like with firefighters, we have medical studies that they're more prone.
I just saw a national one about dispatch.
Okay, that would be good to get a hold of. Because if you start doing family service workers, you're gonna pull in all of your mental health workers who are out there. And you're casting a very wide net, so if we can get the.
Yeah, could you send us some studies over the weekend?
Yep, I definitely can do that, and we will gather that. I will say that one study that I know that sticks out relates to correctional officers who nationally at least experience PTSD at a higher rate than returning veterans who served in combat. So we will gather that information and get it to the committee.
Yeah, this has been a national conversation about dispatch as well.
Dispatch, actually.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll contemplate this one. It was in a different bill that died in House appropriations. Is that right?
Yeah, it got if you remember, the last day of crossover for the Appropriations Committee was also a day of an impending snowstorm, and the committee members gave up and left. So I think it would have been supported. It passed out of the House General Committee unanimously, but because of the threat of snow.
Thank you for that context as well. But yeah, I think this is a national conversation that we're moving toward. So thank you for bringing this to our attention. If
Thank you.
DOL or the administration wants to get us something over the weekend, you're welcome to, so we can weigh both and make a decision. But thank you, Steve. We look forward to taking this up and learning more over the weekend.
Thank you very much.
As we need you a bunch.
Bye-bye.
Chair Marcotte, sorry that we're behind.
So we're gonna pivot from protecting our
Yes.
workforce to.
Yes, and if I could put a fine point, Damien, we do want to keep some time for H55 that we have on the schedule after this. I'm gonna help Magali to get in touch with you. I think it would just be good to figure out what is in the bill, like in a really high level, and which direction we're headed for next week.
Yeah, there's a couple of decision points. I know you need
Yeah.
to walk through new language with John as well this morning.
Yeah, we didn't get
We
to
didn't
do
get
that,
to
so we
do
just
that.
wanna stay at that level of like, here's this new language, do you wanna keep it in or not? But as high level as we could do, it'll probably be like
Yeah,
20
I'll
minutes.
just wait for Magali to reach out to us, maybe both of us, so we can
Yeah.
both be here.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you so much.
Okay, Mr. Chair.
Have a chair, Mr. Chair. And I'm glad you stayed the entire time, Michael. Thank you for staying for the entire gathering.
Oh,
I didn't make the whole thing.
Oh, you didn't, you stayed for, but you stayed through,
Well, you told me I had to. stay.
I know, you had to
You-
stay for the majority of this with a lament.
So we do have a possible vote on this bill, because I don't think we have had any opposition to it. So, sorry. I think the chair will set the stage for this bill, but I do want to name that
There's Mark Cox.
there's a possible vote at the end of this. We have not heard any opposition. Anyone has decided to testify in any kind of opposition to the bill.
Well, and we've changed it a little bit since you last saw it. Anyway, Mike, you launch us, set the stage.
Good morning, Committee, Madam Chair. Thank you for the invitation to talk about H 707. So for the record, I'm Representative Michael Markov, Coventry. I chair House Commerce and Economic Development, and I was also the chair of the Sockwood Task Force Group. So before
Special Oversight Committee on Workforce Expansion and Development.
and I'm glad you put that because sometimes I forget what that is.
And
I don't think we ever heard it in the first place here.
No.
Good to know.
And we,
I have to keep going back to
Yeah.
the bill and looking at, you know, well, how did David drive it or not, but.
yeah, thank you.
But I think, you know, the bill that came out of the House, we had a lot of conversation and actually the bill is the report from the Sockwood Committee. And I think there's three of the 5 committee members here. Now Kendall,
Three of us, be
Kendall
careful what you
Smith
talk
is
about.
the 4th and
Yeah.
Adam Grenold has the.
Organization.
Who's here,
Okay,
yeah.
so Adam is here, so.
He's got your back.
So you got 4 of the 5 then.
Yeah, better be careful, any decisions I can make.
So we had this was a longer process than we anticipated when we created the statute and rightly so, because we were able to hire a really good consultant to work with us and help us through this process. And through that process, they gave us 3 different scenarios. that
And
we
this
looked at.
they were
That's
right?
it, yeah.
Okay.
And
It's just hard, yeah.
and we've adopted pieces from each of the 3 recommendations that they made. That, so, you know, the first one is to shrink the size of the workforce development board, make it a more manageable, more nimble group, and following WIOA. So we follow the federal government guidelines, and I think we've got it down to 26 or 27 members.
27,
So,
Somewhat reasonable.
right.
63, that's.
Yep, but on the same thought, we also have created an executive committee that can, that brings that nimbleness even more focus. And then along with that is creating the Office of Workforce Expansion and Development, which would be directly under the governor. He would be with the advice and consent of the Senate for that person. And so I think the things that we were down to were, you know, what are the qualifications that we want to see from for this new director, that we can give that advice to the governor on who to look for, and not just this governor, but governors going forward. So those administrations will have an idea of what we really need for this position. And we're hoping that, you know, we didn't want to see this as a political appointee. We want to see this as an appointee that is actually going to help our workforce throughout the state, the coordination of all our programs, both inside and outside of state government. And someone that can look regionally, work with creating regional groups that can work with each region because they're not all the same, as we all know. So I think we worked. The other piece to this is 540 in the statute, which outlines the duties of, who number one, who's the champion of workforce development. And so by creating this new workforce expansion director, we need to be careful that we're not changing pieces in WIOA that put us out of compliance. And so
Remind everybody what WIOA is.
right, it's Workforce Innovation Opportunities Act. And so this is a federal program that helps bring our lower income people, getting them good job training, that type of thing. So we get a good amount of money from the Fed to do this. We don't want to put that in harm's way. So we need to figure out how we separate these duties out, or which duties go along with WIOA and which duties would go along with this new directive. And they may overlap, but we have to have that discussion. We tried to do it outside. I mean, I met with other members of SOCWED. We sat down with Department of Labor, and as we sat talking about this, we push on one and it squishes out the other way. So we really need to work more on that. And we sat down for a couple hours, and it was apparent that we really couldn't write anything right now. We need more testimony, more better understanding. So the SOCWED has talked about this a lot, and in the House version, the 707 that we sent you, we asked that the new State Workforce Development Board work with Department of Labor and the Executive Committee to come up with those guidelines and job description as well. So I think in talking with the Vice Chair and the proposal that she's putting in front of you, I've looked at it, and I think if we want to get this going faster, I think this is a better route to go, is to keep SOCWED going and work with the new State Workforce Development Board and then work with Department of Labor, instead of trying to get, if there's new people on the Executive Committee, new people on the State Workforce Development Board, up to speed on what all of this is, because I think the SOCWED has been immersed in this. So I think we would be well versed and could get this thing going a lot quicker than this. So I would, in full agreement with the proposal that's in front of you, and ask you to consider that.
Yeah.
Can I just add a little bit?
Yeah.
So this SOCWED was created by this committee. We were poised to actually create the Office of Workforce
Right.
Expansion and Development. You were.
I didn't like the term
22,
czar.
I can't remember.
but
Yeah, it was the
I
czar.
was here.
So and we worked with the administration. The administration said, please don't do this. We're not ready to create a new office just yet. Let's study this. Let's work with this. We invested $250,000 in this work. We did national in-depth review of what workforce developments, and Ron's gonna talk about this in a minute after Rick presents the new draft. But we invested a lot of money and time. We spent a year and a half working together on this. And because this is one, as we know, one of our top state priorities is really creating better integrated, fully coordinated system. And this, so SOCWED, the shift we've made in this is really simply to Section 4, where instead of having a workforce, another working study group that isn't yet up to speed, that isn't yet appointed, that we would use SOCWED, reauthorize it, it would save us a year in time. If workforce is that big a priority, this saves us a year of time and gets us going. We would be reviewing all the statutes that workforce is in. We would be working with the Department of Labor, with our own commissioner, and to set up what and differentiate who does what and how we go forward. So that is what you're about to here, but that is really the impetus behind the change.
Yes.
It's saving money, saving time, and this would ensure that we don't have the horse before the cart.
Right.
I mean, the horse doesn't need to come before the cart. This would put the horse before the cart. And I hope we'll do what we want to do.
Sounds good. Yeah.
That's good. Just add one more thing.
Yeah.
The third piece to the recommendations that we got from PCG was data trust for data bank.
Okay.
And
Oh, yes.
that's in the 707 was passed the House as well.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, we've had some conversations with ADS as well. And there's other areas in state government that they're looking at doing the same thing. So we need to make sure that we're working close with them.
Yes.
But I think, you know, North Dakota, we took testimony from North Dakota. They've worked on this for 10 years and it's being implemented.
Mm-hmm.
We have other jurisdictions out there that are doing the same thing. And the benefits to us could be immense.
Yeah.
You know, I think the Sockwoods, after those discussions, were that on the House side that we're asked by appropriations to evaluate every year. How, you know, Department of Labor, all of the, and ACCD and everyone that we have jurisdiction over. And, you know, through that, there are nonprofits and other entities that are asking for money. They might go to the administration and ask for those dollars. When it doesn't work, they come to us. And then we have to make the decision, do we fund them, do we not?
Yeah.
But that should all be flowing through the administration and using and having that data and using that data to make those decisions. And so we could bring the administration in then and say, why didn't you fund this? Because here's the data.
Right.
Right. And so it leaves us out of the loop of having to choose winners and losers.
Yeah.
And leaves it where it should be with the administration, but we can't do that without good data.
Right.
So I think that's what the intent of creating this database would do.
Right.
Could you just speak to creating the office? Because I know it's an ongoing issue with the administration. But we felt very strong that we wanted to create this office, even if we didn't, even if it took a while to hire the executive director. Can you just speak to that?
I think it was important for us to make sure that we had an office, that it's not, you know, I think some of the offices were through executive order. And I think the governor's position is that he would rather not create the office. But we felt very strongly that we have to have an office. And currently the Department of Labor has hired someone to be the executive director of the State Workforce Development Board. So this is larger than that. And I think for the Sockwed, we felt that it was more appropriate to have an office.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that some of our process that we'll be working through is to identify who does what so that we aren't stepping on people's toes and the responsibilities.
Or you are, but you're intentional about it.
Yeah, no, but thoughtful. And it is also, I would point out, and I think that the commissioner will speak to this, an ongoing concern that we not step on the toes of the governor's ability to make the decision, but that we feel that we would at least like the Department of Human Resources and the State Workforce Development Board to at least hear some of the qualifications we think are important. And so
I think, you know, it's good for us for everybody to work on what are the qualifications we think that should be looked at. We're not tying the governor's hand saying, you know, you have to choose somebody with all of these qualifications.
Right.
But we're hoping that, you know, with the advice and consent of the Senate, that when you would vet these people, that you can look at that and understand if the governor chose someone that had none of these, why was that done? And so I think it assists the committee as well. So, without tying the administration's hands on who they have to choose, or, having someone pick three and choose from those, I think it's good for us to at least provide some guidelines for the administration to look at.
Well, while we have 4 of the 5 members here, I just want to name my 2 lingering pet issues. One is I've gone to so many workforce meetings where people say, okay, well, we can't solve the housing problem, so let's talk about everything else. And I just, like, we need this group and this person to really care about how people embed themselves in our community, housing, childcare, the cost of living. I'm beside myself when I hear people say, like, with the housing is just not our issue to solve. It's everyone's issue to solve. So I just want to make sure that that's part of the conversation. going forward.
Housing and workforce are like this.
Well, housing is like this for everything right now. We don't have a workforce without housing.
Right. Well, we don't have a workforce without housing. We don't have a workforce without childcare. You know, I mean, there's a lot of things that blend into
Yeah.
bringing in a strong workforce.
Yes, I encourage people to look at the Economic Policy Institute's website. It lets you choose how many adults and children are in your household and what your overall comfortable cost of living would be. We are higher than most urban areas in the country, in every county in Vermont. So that has to be, a workforce question as well.
Yeah.
The only other issue I wanted to raise is you talked about database, data bank. There have been so many, I would call them failed attempts to have a clearinghouse for job opportunities and internship opportunities. I'm on the UVM Economic Advisory Council. I think we paid for Handshake, and Handshake is just awful. There's too many systems that nobody's checking the user experience, nobody's evaluating our clearinghouse tools. I hope we're doing a better job of that, because I feel like a human Rolodex for young people here who I don't even know where to tell them to look right now for job opportunities that fit their skills as they graduate. So
Do we have a
put that on our website.
I can think of
That would
three
be
right
great.
now.
That's too many and they're clunky. So that should be so much easier than it is.
The portal, the entry piece.
And we should have not paid this much for it to be so confusing. Senator Harrison.
I'm not gonna comment on systems. But yes, it'd be great to get it right. I just wanna put in a plug for transportation, because that's what I hear on all systems, all segments. I hear the same thing about, well, there's transportation, but we can't do anything about that. So we can do something about that. So please do include that in your.
And there has been, there are areas where this transportation can work. There's a woodworking company that came to Canada, settled into North Troy. And a couple of years ago, I went down, they've been working with Hireability and working with the State Transportation Agency. And they've been able to create, providing buses to bring their workers to and from work. So, and JP does the same thing, I'm
Right.
sure around the
I was
state.
gonna
that's
say,
been
yeah.
replicated. So
I'm proud of where we've done that.
there's things that that are being done now. You have to understand where that is being done and how can we help bolster that to get people to and from work.
Right. If people haven't looked at this, the Boston Globe yesterday had a huge piece about young people leaving Massachusetts in very alarming numbers. And
They're coming here.
They are not.
Okay.
They're going to Penn State, and that should be a concern of ours. Yes, they're going to places with low
Yeah,
cost
it's
of
here
living.
in Texas and 900
Florida, yeah.
Texas.
Yeah.
And its house.
Yes.
They'll come back when they have kids and they want good.
You flipped it, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have two
We'll make it
Southerners who came
Okay,
here.
let's get
But I
that
just
article
really
to
want
everybody.
people to look at exit interviews and the reason we lose people as well.
Let's get that article to the committee.
So
if
we
could.
have until 10:30, so we have 25 more minutes on this. Rick, my understanding is we've done a walkthrough, we're just looking at the new language now.
Yes, that's all.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you,
Madam
Mr.
Chair,
Chair, I
thank you.
imagine
Thank
you're
you, committee.
headed back to committee.
I'll go back to the floor.
Oh,
Thank you.
What,
yeah, so we were nice interlude.
what are you doing?
I don't know, I haven't been there yet.
Oh.
Thank you.
Oh, Yale, yeah. Short-term rental surcharge on there.
There's a rules and deals surcharge, yeah.
Okay.
Good morning.
Okay.
Just saying, Office Legislative Council from Texas. And
All right.
I
You're
didn't
the
make
reverse.
yeah, I'm trying to help with those numbers.
Thank you.
So what you have in front of you is 1.4 of the committee amendment to 707.
it is a strike all, but it really just takes on a couple of things. If you go down to section 4, which is on page
12.
Page 12. I have it on the screen as well. So section 4 is new, however, section 4 replaces a section 4 in the version of Half the House that kind of did the same thing. It just changes the group in charge of doing the thing. So as Chair Marcotte and Senator Clarkson discussed, this section now reauthorizes SOCWID, the Special Oversight Committee on Workforce Expansion Developments that was created a couple years ago. And their job is now to review section 540, 10 VSA 540. And 540, getting looked at it, basically tries to lay out who the leader is in workforce development, training, education, which currently goes mostly to the Commissioner of Labor. But with these changes we're making to the State Workforce Board and the addition of the Executive Director of the Office of Workforce Expansion Development, there was the thought that we should maybe kind of rearrange section 540. So this group would look at that statute and discuss changes, and also look at the qualifications needed for this executive director job and suggest those recommendations as well to the governor. So that's section A, kind of an overview. Section B, the membership shall be the same members that were originally appointed. If there's any vacancies, those vacancies shall be filled by the relevant appointed authority. The meetings, the state director of workforce development shall call the first meeting of the committee to occur on or before June 1st. So this section would be effective on passage, because we don't want to, if we set July 1st, there would be the guarantee that we could get this going. So
that's the whole point.
Right. So June 1st, so pretty soon, that goes with Senator Clarkson's idea to get this moving as quickly as possible. The committee shall select a chair from among its legislative members at the first meeting. And the reason it should be a legislator is because they want the assistance of legislative counsel. And if the chair is a legislator, that allows me or one of my colleagues from me to help them out. Subdivision 3, a majority shall constitute a quorum. The committee shall not meet more than 8 times.
Which is the same as the other one. So this is just exactly the same.
It may have been 10, but yeah, 10 or 8, I can't remember the time.
But wait, shows 8.
Yeah.
Could I ask a clarifying question?
Yeah.
Page 13, line 4, where it says the state director of workforce development shall call the first meeting of the committee to order to occur. Are we talking about Jay as the director of workforce development?
That's the way I wrote it, yes.
As a member of the.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, I think one of the things we're going to talk about and a request that the commissioner may be making is.
That's fine. In this, I didn't know if it should have been, if Representative Marcotte is the chair or co-chair of it.
So I think this is mirrored from the original authorization. Is that correct?
It is. However, the original was the chair of the workforce board. The reason I didn't do the chair is because there could be this transition period.
Got it. Okay.
Even though if it's June 1st, the chair is still Adam, right?
Yes, but there could be a vacancy. I can make it.
No, that's fine. I just wanted to clarify. So thank you.
So
Technically,
we could further clarify as we discuss.
Drew's point, technically, the board is ceasing to exist around the same time period.
July 1st.
In theory, there could be a new chair, so, yeah.
Right.
The time.
Yeah, and so the software originally was the chair, and I think if we have this start June 1st, but again, I wanted a more maybe permanent position, just at least start the meeting.
Yeah.
But
So are we looking at any changes to this language or?
I think the commissioner, I think we're okay with this at the moment.
Yeah, at the moment, my own
At
comment,
the
which I already
moment, might
mentioned.
not be good enough for us right now, so is this gonna be voted on today?
For the record, Michael Harrington, Commissioner, Department of Labor. On this specific piece, I mentioned this to Senator Clarkson. It's not a hill we need to die on, but I think it would have been our preference originally and going forward that it'd be the commissioner who is a member of the SOCWED as the current leader of the state workforce effort, and not Jay as the division director. Now, I fully expect Jay to participate, but from a appointing authority perspective, it would have been our preference that it be the Commissioner of Labor, and then it could be the Commissioner of Labor.
We could
shall
make
call
that
the
change
first
right
meeting.
now.
Yeah.
I mean, June 1st is coming up quite
Right,
fast.
that's
so
why it's
Can we make that
relatively
change
minor
right
change,
now?
but
So the only issue I have with that is in original Softwood,
yeah,
the Commissioner of Labor was not
correct.
a member of Softwood. So
Mhm.
we are reusing the membership of Softwood. So it'd be a little strange for a non-member of Softwood to call the first meeting of.
No, I think the suggestion would be to make the Commissioner the member representative from the Department of Labor, not the Director.
So I would need to, okay,
You need to make another
I would need to make
change
another change.
with
Because
the constitution of the,
I have, language that says, the members that.
can you say like commissioner or designee?
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah,
Commissioner
and
designate.
then put in,
I don't know, it's kind of strange to have a non-committee member call the first meeting.
no, I mean, up above where you
For the
need to
membership.
change the membership.
But the.
I don't list the members because I just
Are we
reauthorize.
worried about that?
No.
Okay, so let's just put in the commissioner then. Is there somewhere else we need?
Switching out the commissioner for Jay.
But in the,
Yes, yeah.
no, but I think in the
In number
membership,
one.
if you could, if it's easily done.
Yeah,
That's the issue.
If it's easily done, I
That's the
think
issue.
being able to say that the Commissioner will serve as the representative instead of the Division Director,
mhm.
of Workforce Development at the Department of Labor. And then it would be the Commissioner designate.
Give me a few minutes.
Yeah,
yeah. Again,
We're
that's fine.
just
We can
telling
talk
the
about
governor and establishing,
Yeah,
a gubernatorial level department.
I
So it
agree.
makes
No,
more-
it's
Yeah.
an office, it's not a department. Right.
Okay,
and all.
Like
so,
racial equity and like.
But this also says the members appointed shall continue as members.
I know.
Right, that's the part.
so he's fixing that.
Yeah, but isn't that the intent?
That's
of
the
this, to
intent.
continue this group,
But
does
the
it work
commission-
well
So
together?
the preference was, so Jay was listed as the original member, and we're not sure why it ended up being the Director of the division and not the Commissioner of Labor. So our preference would be that we change the membership, that the Commissioner of Labor or their designee
Yeah.
be listed as the member from labor.
Oh, I
usually
understand
what's
that's
done.
what you want,
Yeah.
but isn't this working well?
I don't think it's gonna stop working the way it does, but
It was-
usually you have a commissioner or secretary or their designee named in statute.
No, I understand that, but
Yeah.
this is only a temporary group too. It's not, there's not ongoing authority.
Since this is restructuring, it should be, I think, the Commissioner of Labor. While the titles change and things change, I mean, I think Jay will be there, I don't think anybody
Yeah.
doesn't want that, nobody's gonna change
Yeah,
the
yeah.
working relationship.
I'm,
But usually in statute, we put a
No,
commissioner.
I understand.
given the administration isn't getting all that they would prefer at the moment, I think that this is a shift, and I think Jay is okay with this. I think this is a shift, but have it in one on line 4, that the Commissioner of Labor, if it works out,
I'll work it out.
that we could,
Yeah,
that
we do
could-
have until 10:30,
We'll
so.
call.
I
Plenty of
feel like
And we have
some
some great people here.
majority
Plenty
Let's
of
see.
are
I
okay
think
with
about
it.
It's also not the
Doesn't
end of the
seem like a
world,
big deal,
so it's just,
yeah.
It's just like.
Alright, I
no.
just want,
I'll
I
make-
mean, I've heard really good things about this group and I just want it to continue
Right.
well.
Yeah, I don't
Doing good
think,
work.
I think Jay is here, do you wanna say anything about this?
So we'll continue to support the group in the ways that I supported it before.
Right,
Which were substantial.
yeah.
Yeah.
And this is a substantial shift from how DOL has done workforce development. So it really, the commissioner should be just as much a part of this because this is about transferring parts of what the commissioner oversees to a new office. It just makes sense and we have to move on. We do have to move on. I wanna give you both time for.
Yeah, and
This is really not a help spread of time.
And while you have folks talking, I'll make the changes and
Okay, yeah, exactly.
powers and duties of Softwood. So part 1, the committee in consultation with the Office of Legislative Counsel shall review the statute that determines the leader of workforce development and training and education to engage with workforce development stakeholders to evaluate the effectiveness of the current legislative statute and determine due to changes in the state workforce development board as set forth in this act, how the authorities and responsibilities for the coordination of workforce education and training set forth in 540 should be modified to ensure there's effective and comprehensive leadership in workforce development, education, and training between the Commissioner of Labor the executive director of the Office of Workforce Expansion and Development, and any other relevant authorities. That's their first task. The second task, the committee, in consultation with the executive committee of the State Workforce Development Board and the Department of Human Resources, shall develop qualifications to recommend to the governor for consideration for the position of this executive director. Assistance for the purposes of administrative and technical support, the committee shall have the assistance of the Office of Legislative Operations. For the purposes of drafting recommended legislation, the committee shall have the assistance of the Office of Legislative Counsel. And for the purposes of drafting recommended job qualifications, the committee shall have the assistance of the Department of Human Resources. So instead of reporting, there's just going to be requirements. There's no need to have a long-winded report here. One, the committee shall submit recommended job qualifications pursuant to D2, which is this here, of the section to House Commerce and Senate Economic Development for October 15th. So pretty quick turnaround, but we want to get it in before the next session. And before that, Senator Clarkson, you want to get that person hired as quickly as
We
possible.
want to get this person hired as quickly as possible. So we want to get our recommendations to I mean, at least for them to consider as the executive commit, as the State Workforce Development Board and the Department of Human Resources recommends as much as they recommend to the governor, at least funnel some of those ideas to the governor, because it's the governor's choice. We don't want to step on the governor's toes.
So we're just getting the knowledge that the qualification.
Exactly. The things we
And then part two, the second requirement is the committee shall submit recommended legislative language pursuant to that section 540.
Right.
To House Commerce, Senate Economic Development on before November 30th. That's really more about the drafting deadlines and the General Assembly. Typical per diem compensation for legislators, non-legislators. And now I am setting an expiration. The previous version of Sockwood had no expiration. So now we're setting the expiration date of January 15, 2025 for Sockwood.
Done great work. I like expiration dates, so that makes
So it's good for operations.
board.
Except with veggie.
That's true. That's true. You like sunsets. You like sunsets.
Okay.
I'll work on change as well. Let's give
Great.
questions.
So we do need to get back to Rick before 10:30. Are Adam and Ron our last two witnesses? Is there anything else DOL need to say right now?
We do have a couple of items.
Okay, so I'll,
So
then Ron and Adam, we appreciate you being here.
You want to do them first?
Yeah, let's do that because he's traveling. Adam is doing this as he
They're
travels.
first on my list,
Yes,
but are
great.
you okay?
Nope, yep.
Okay, so right, you're,
Poor Adam
if you
is
could
traveling.
just take a couple minutes each, I think we're just running low on time. And we'll start with Ron for my agenda list.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Senator Clarkson, and members of the committee. It's a pleasure to be here this morning representing the PCG team, which was assembled by PCG, has an enormous amount of experience in not only workforce development policy, but also in a very broad operational context. Mike Lawrence, Nancy Snyder, myself, Alicia have all served at the local level. So we've all done program implementation as well as program policy. I want to point out that as we started this process, we've spoken to over 100 people across the state about Vermont's workforce needs. And I want to thank the SOCWED for all of their candor and their cooperation as we worked through this process. But we were guided by a few principles. And first, they were that whatever we suggested for the model had to be simple with minimal bureaucracy. It had to be efficient, given limited resources, both at the state and the federal level. The model has to be nimble because circumstances change. There needs to be a recognition that the labor market is in fact a market. It's a very dynamic market. There's over 100 million transactions a year in the US labor market between hires and separations. So it had to be nimble in order to respond to needs. And then it also had to assign responsibility to various programs and departments with also providing the commensurate authority to undertake those actions. And finally, the form of the workforce board in the office had to follow the function. I think we were also guided by what we felt was the prime work of the State Workforce Development Board and its staff. And that was assisting in the convening of these continuing statewide conversations. We think those have to happen. You've got to be human-centered design. You've got to reach out to the customer. You already mentioned customers bring in a number of unique experiences. They have issues around transportation. They have issues around housing. So this part of this was to create that platform that all of the various programs that are
Okay,
administered at the state level can come together.
Thoughts, because we do have to move on. If you could just stop leaving thoughts, and we appreciate all the work we did.
Certainly. Again, we felt that elevating the role of the State Workforce Board, not only to meet WIOA requirements, but also to broadly accountable to the governor, the head of government, to you all. We felt that this focal point for workforce development was critical to Vermont, not only to accommodate all of the program, but all the success in meeting the needs of both the workers and the businesses in Vermont. And with that, Madam Chair, I'll conclude. Happy to present my remarks.
Thank you. We appreciate having your report and all the work you've done. Thanks so much, Ron. Adam, I don't want to have to give you the hook. I feel badly about this, but you're in a passenger, so if we could just take a couple minutes, and it's great to see you, and we appreciate all your work in Southern Vermont.
And all your work
Great.
as chair of the State Workforce Development.
Yeah, and the rest of Southern Vermont.
Yeah.
All of Vermont. Let's go on. Okay.
Great, thank you so much. Are you able to hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Madam Chair and fellow members. I'm going to keep my comments very brief, given the scarcity of time. I think the committee change that's been proposed makes sense. It really just codifies the way in which the committee is working with the commissioner. And, I want to echo many of Chair Marcotte's comments and just general support about the process and the outcome. And glad to see this moving forward. It really will bring a much needed improvement and change to the system. I'll end there, saving any time for Commissioner to speak further.
Thank you. And thank you for both the RDC's support, because the RDCs have written us a terrific letter of support, which came from Andy, I think, Andy Julie.
Thanks. Yes, we saw that. Thanks so much, Adam, for talking to us from the road and all your hard work. You have a new charge and a big one, so we're excited to get updates. Thanks so much. Commissioner.
2 quick items.
Yeah.
2 minutes or less. Okay.
Right.
The first is a technical piece, probably for Ledge Council. Page 15 talks about per diems, and the way it's written, the piece that caught our attention was on line 9, saying that
15, is that?
page 15, line 9, subsection 3, really, but I don't know if it was intentional this way or not, but right now the way it's written is the Department of Labor will end up paying for the per diems of all participants on the committee, including legislators.
That's not intended.
And I think that would be us paying for non-legislative members on the committee. We're happy to pay the per diem on that.
Right. Thank you for
Yeah,
that.
so that was just a
Generous.
technical piece.
Who do you want to cover?
I think it should just, where it says under 1, legislative members are eligible for per diem. However, it's typically written, but that should be paid for out of whatever mechanism the legislature has. And then non-members, number 2, could just say payment, 2 and 3 could be combined. So that for non-members of the committee, the department will pay the per diem.
We almost got away with it.
Almost. And then the only other piece I'll add here, and this is just an observation, and you can do with it what you will, but I think we've been very open and vocal in the last time we testified about not having an office. The governor's position has been to not expand state government and not do things that could potentially incur additional costs. However, the committee wants to move forward regardless of that with the office. I was mentioning to Senator Clarkson that I looked at a couple other states. One thing that a committee of workforce expansion development does in the current setup is, it's somewhat duplicative. There are many offices of workforce development across the state. Many agencies and departments have them. But what I found in another state was they created an office of workforce strategy. And so really what you're talking about is an office at the governor's level that is focused on statewide strategy.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
to that end, I think we could consider, if we want, renaming the office and renaming it the Office of Workforce Strategy and Development. If you
And the only other
like that.
comment I had to align with your thoughts, Senator, was if you wanted to name in here that there shall be an office dedicated to workforce development and expansion, and that the name of the office would come out of the SOCWIC, because then.
So we could
Yeah,
thoughtfully
however you want.
rename it.
Yes,
Yes, let's
however
not
you
do it
want
in
to
the
do it.
next 3 minutes, so.
Okay, let's talk
Does
about
that make
thoughtful
sense?
renaming of
Right.
the final.
And you don't
office.
have, like, we don't have to bring it up right now. Do you wanna go back? to-
What's the last recommendation? Do you want to change?
Let's listen to the commissioner.
I just, the two recommendations was either we change it here and it's the Office of Workforce Strategy. You had added, I think, development in there, or workforce development strategy, maybe.
I mean, expansion and development are honestly the same thing. We could just say strategy and expansion.
I think strategy and development.
I think strategy and
Strategy,
development.
either one, expansion or development, so strategy and development.
Let's do strategy and development.
Just rename it that.
Yeah, Office of Strategy.
I think you wanted the
Development
web,
and
but
strategy.
it's not a great acronym. so we'll-
Workforce development or workforce strategy and development. Because this office doesn't also provide direct services to customers, right?
Right.
Maybe
Yeah.
there's a future contemplation, but,
Senator Harrison, I think expansion just promises too much. That's
Yeah.
fair.
Right.
and then the only other was the technical correction of. I got that.
Okay. So Rick, what is your best process right now?
Give me 5 minutes to,
Yes.
Okay,
I did change the writing.
great. Okay.
If you
I'm
wanna
gonna
vote,
say-
if you wanna vote on a bill with these,
I entirely bid.
we can do that.
Let's take a 3-minute bio break
Okay.
and give you the time to sit in peace. So we're gonna